You're listening to the Dunesteef Audio Fiction Magazine. And now here's your host, Big Krawiec and Rish Outfield.
Hello, good evening, and welcome.
Same to you, sir. Welcome to the Dunesteef Audio Fiction Magazine.
Volume 1, Number 4, page 74.
This is one of your hosts, Rish Outfield.
And I'm Big Krawiec.
That's our 080T.
That's right.
And I'm Announcer Man.
Oh, and the whole gang's here.
Yeah, thank goodness. Today's story is Cold Trail Blazing by Stephen Gaskell.
Stephen Gaskell lives in Brighton, a pebbly-beached English seaside town, complete with pier, where he spends his days riding in coffee shops, getting injured playing football, and resenting the day job. He studied rocket science at University College, Oxford, and artificial intelligence at the University of Sussex.
Hear, hear.
But thinks his most beneficial graduation came from Clarion East at Michigan State University. He's been published in Nature, Writers of the Future, Volume 23, and Cosmos magazine, amongst other places. But won't be happy until he cracks one of the big three. He's currently single and encourages beautiful, brilliant millionairesses to contact him through his website at www.stephengaskell.com. The following story is previously unpublished. Today's story is narrated by Eleiece Krawiec and edited by Josh Roseman, and today's music is Vacuum Fields by Aquascapes, as well as The Hand That Paused to Gather and Miraflores Locks by Escape Philosophy. And you can find links to everything in the show notes.
Cold Trailblazing, written by Stephen Gaskell. The bus lurches right, pressing Lydia against the window and giving her a clear view down the steep scree slope. The engine chugs and splutters. As it is about to stall, the driver changes gear and the bus finishes the hairpin bend with a burst.
Sorry,
says Gopal. He rights himself in the seat next to Lydia. Gopal is a newly qualified guide, and his command of English is stilted and poor. Lydia has chosen him for this very reason. It's okay. Lydia doesn't mind her body being bumped or jostled. These days, she sees it as something apart from herself. She puts down her book, its spine easily bending on her lap, and stares out over the patchwork of fields. She feels lightheaded, not from the chatter of the other passengers, or the print or the winding route. She feels lightheaded because it was 2 years ago that she made the same journey with Ben, the last ride they shared before the 4-day trek to Annapurna Base Camp. Annapurna Base Camp, where he disappeared. Two days earlier, she stood in a policeman's office in Kathmandu. "Why is the investigation closed?" Lydia snapped, bearing down over the man and his Spartan desk. Her skin itched from Kathmandu's sweltering, dusty air. The policeman, a thin man with a stiff navy blue shirt studded with insignia, bridged his fingers and looked at her with compassion.
"Please sit, Miss Barnes."
"Answer my question!" The closing of the case was the spur that had brought her back out to Nepal. Before, she'd been too afraid.
"Please."
He gestured to the chair. Reluctantly, she sat. He went on.
"Please forgive me if what I am about to say sounds unfeeling. I only have the best of intentions."
He paused. The of the ceiling fan competed with the din of the traffic outside.
"How old are you, Miss Barnes?"
She didn't like the question. 27. I won't give up on Ben, not until I see—" The image of his corpse, twisted and broken down some dark ravine, choked her for a moment. "Not until I see his body with my own eyes."
That may never happen. We closed the investigation because we satisfied ourselves Ben died on the mountain. Nobody has seen him since the day he was reported missing. Could he have descended without being seen by a single soul? Past the Sherpas, the guest houseworkers, the other trekkers, and the sanctuary rangers. Miss Barnes, I personally made sure every single person on Annapurna that weekend was accounted for. Ben didn't come down.
"Maybe he's still up there," Lydia blurted, "living in the wilderness." With resignation, the policeman asked,
Did Ben have any reason to disappear?
Lydia shook her head.
He had a fall, or was lost in an avalanche. An accident took his life, and now he's gone.
The policeman's words felt like knives stabbing her heart. For so long she had fought to keep her hope alive. Letters to politicians, interviews with the press, fundraising drives. They were in love. How could this happen?
I'm sorry.
Even Ben's family have let go. Grieve, they say. Grieve and move on, Lydia. Don't let a cruel world ruin more than one life. Thank you for your efforts, she said, and got up. The policeman nodded, fiddling with some papers on his desk. At Naya Pool, the bus creaks to the side of the road. Everyone, save for a few Nepalese, clambers out. It is mid-afternoon, the sun high in a hazy sky. Lydia watches the locals and tourists scatter like dandelion seeds in the wind. A couple, much like Ben and herself, help each other don their backpacks and then briskly head into the village, doubtless eager to make good time before night settles. She holds back. She hasn't told Gopal why she is here. He must be puzzled by her lack of urgency, but he remains quiet. She wants this trek to be as close as possible to the original. She hopes it might trigger some insight into Ben's disappearance. Or, God forgive her, give her the strength to let go. And that means spending the first night here in Naya Pool, a nowhere place of tin shacks, because last time she'd left her trekking permit back in the hotel in Pokhara, and they'd had to wait the remainder of the day for it to be motorbiked out by the owner's brother. At the end of the muddy track along which the village's shanty-like structures spring on either side, Lydia stops Gopal and points to an unassuming building. Tonight, here. Nobody is home so early in the day, and Lydia leaves Gopal sitting on a makeshift bench outside while she wanders around the village. The place is little changed. Here is the near-empty concrete building that houses the single phone line from which Ben called his family and let them know they were both alive and well. There is the drink shack where they joked about her poor memory over a couple of bottles of Sprite. At the end of the village stand the pack donkeys. They're still penned in behind a rickety barbed wire fence, hooves deep in the boggy ground, laden with their own ordure. She ambles back to the guest house. Gopal is studiously reading a torn and grubby English primer. The family is still not home. She joins him on the bench and delves into her backpack for her own book. She bought it in Pokhara yesterday in the same second-hand bookstore she and Ben visited all those months ago. It's a New Age bestseller from the 70s. A physicist from California argues Eastern mysticism and modern physics have deep and profound connections. The yin-yang cover caught her eye, and since she's here in the East and Ben studied physics, it felt the right book to buy. In the first part, the author lays the whole of Western civilization's troubles at the door of science. Mechanistic, reductionist thinking, born in Democritus's atomized world and culminating in Newton's clockwork universe, imprisoning our minds. We are lost in the details, confused by our arbitrary slicing of reality. Lydia reads, fascinated, but unsure how this relates to herself. Not much later the family arrive home. She recognizes the shy boy with the sad eyes. He runs back to his mother when he sees strangers sitting outside his home. The mother, Purdy, drops her boy's satchel and snatches her hands to her cheeks. "Lydia?" There are hugs and a few tears. The father, Ravi, makes chai. If Lydia closes her eyes and inhales the cardamom-laced aroma, she can almost imagine it is 3 years earlier, and it is Ben, instead of Gopal, squeezed up next to her. The talk begins small. The children's school life, their plans to build a second room at the back, tourists, and alcohol. The light fades, and donkeys begin to clutter the track, chomping into Hessian feed bags tied over their muzzles. Lydia feels she is ready to talk about Ben. "Thank you for your letters. They meant a lot to me." "We think of you often," says Purdy, not flinching from Lydia's filmy eyes.
"We help police how we could,"
adds Ravi, his young son calm on his knee. "I'm very grateful."
"You would like to see an article?"
Ravi asks. "Ravi," Purdy says, eyes flashing daggers at her husband.
Of course, stupid. The last thing you want."
No, I'd like that. I've come back to live the trek again." Lydia doesn't add that maybe she's come to put the past to rest, too. It would feel like a betrayal. Ravi bangs about in the tiny kitchen, looking for the article.
Here."
He hands her a crisp, yellowed clipping, crudely torn from a newspaper. The corners curl up, and some of the flowery script has run from the odd raindrop, but the print is still readable. The paper feels like it could be ancient papyrus, and Lydia passes it back carefully. "Can you read it to me?" Purdy translates, scanning the text and then looking up and speaking in choppy English. The article is factual and staid, full of dates and routes and sightings. It is painful, almost like hearing an obituary, but Lydia doesn't have the heart to ask Purdy to stop. Near the end, she hears something that makes her feel as if she had splashed her face with water from the river outside. "Asked about the couple's, relationship? Yes, asked about the couple's relationship, Mrs. Nayara said." Purdy smiles upon reading her own name, and then suddenly frowns. "I'm not sure how to say this." "Please, Purdy." "Mrs. Nayara said they were like young lovers, one moment fighting, the next kissing." "Fighting? Was it possible?" "Maybe I say the wrong word," Purdy says, but Lydia is elsewhere, suddenly remembering the quarrel. Ben was angry she had forgotten the permit. They'd argued, loudly, and then she'd stormed off and sulked on the nearby rope bridge which spanned the gnashing slate-gray river. How could she forget that? She can smell Ben. Earthy, clean, reassuring Ben. The smell is so pervasive he must be right here. She wakes up. There is a clamorous noise. Cracks between the corrugated sheets forming the walls let shafts of moonlight into the room. She sees the outlines of the family nestled together on one side of the room, and Gopal in the far corner. The smell of Ben is gone. Only the stale odors of a crowded room steeping the air. The noise is from the donkeys outside. They bray in a chaotic, terrifying din. Ravi pulls himself up from the dark silhouette of his family. He sees Lydia awake.
"Sometimes thieves try to steal the donkeys,"
he whispers.
"I'll take care of it. Go to sleep."
He slips out, and Lydia lies back. Soon, the whinnying dies down to silence. Lydia is asleep before Ravi returns. By noon the next day, Lydia and Gopal have cleared the valley floor and hit the stone steps, which will carry them upwards for the next 2 days. Enormous slate fingers which glitter in the sunlight. Lydia, legs dangling over a wall, presses her palm against the warm rock and wills the magical glistening motes into her body. She hopes they might confer special powers upon her. She remembers thinking that Ben and herself were on a kind of yellow brick road that led somewhere wonderful.
Water?
She twists her head to see Gopal offering some Volvic. Thanks. She is surprised how exhausted her body feels. They've only been climbing hard for 20 minutes. Was this how she felt before? Then, because she feels guilty that she has been ignoring Gopal, she asks, "Are you tired yet?" He grins.
Oh no, never tired.
He hasn't even taken off the bulky rucksack which dwarfs his wiry frame. You weren't woken by the mules last night? They made a terrific noise.
Sorry?
The donkeys, last night. Lydia mimics the demented braying as best she can.
Oh, yes. They wake me too.
Did Ravi catch the thieves? Gopal's smile vanishes.
Not thieves, Lydia. Other things make donkeys make noise.
Other things? Wild animals? Lydia wonders what kind of creatures lurk in the undergrowth off the trail. Snakes?
No. Dead things. How do you say...
Ghosts?
Yes. Ghosts.
The hail hits hard, blistering Lydia's forearms with red marks. The storm came on fast, and they are running the last few hundred yards up to Chamrong, a stone village which clings to the mountainside. 2- and 3-storied guest houses perch along both sides of the trail, which haphazardly meanders upwards. Stepped paddy fields descend to the right. 2 steep, densely vegetated hillsides meet in an enormous V-shape. A broken crown of a mountain rises between the hills, its top dirty gray. Thin clouds hug the peak, making it look like the mountain is venting steam. They reach the first house. Gopal wants to huddle in the doorway, but Lydia shouts him on. Her skin is numb from cold and pain, and she is soaked through, but she wants to get to the right guest house. The steps are steep here, and her lungs burn with each pace. Here, she rasps over the sound of thunder, and they tumble into the Best View Backpackers guest house. The owners are very hospitable, and they flit around Lydia like fireflies, bringing her soft towels and blankets and lemon tea. They don't recognize her, and she doesn't recognize them either. But she remembers laughter here. She and Ben played cards for hours at the next table with a couple of Australian girls, high on the altitude or something in the air. When her hair is no longer dripping, and the mug of steaming tea has been drained, and her toes no longer feel numb, she casts off the blankets draped over her legs and shoulders. She steps to the bar which doubles as the reception desk. "Is the room at the end free?" she asks. "Not free. We have other very good room," the woman says. Behind her there is a montage of photos and postcards, smiling faces and far-flung places. One photo is marooned, alone to one side. "Have you seen this man?" Lydia raises a shaky hand. "Can I see that photo?" The woman probably thinks Lydia is still cold. "This?" She peels it from the wall and hands it over. "Very sad story. Long time ago. I should take down now." The woman chatters on, but Lydia is lost in the picture. It is Ben. Solid, full of life, strapping Ben. But it isn't one of Lydia's photos. He is flanked by the 2 Australian girls. Pretty, tanned, giggling girls posing like glamour models around a Formula 1 champion. She must have taken it with their camera. And the memory snaps back.
What a lucky man I am,
Ben said, winking at the camera. Lydia seethed.
Only a bit of fun, Lids.
Ben said later when they were alone in their room. "How do you think it makes me feel?" she said, trying to push him.
Jesus, chill out.
The book talks about the rational and the intuitive. It suggests Westerners should not mistake abstracted knowledge in its sequential causal symbolic way from reality. It is like a cartographer trying to represent the curved face of the earth with plane maps. The map is not the territory. Lydia wonders what untruths she has made categorizing the world. The next day they come across a woman with a withered face and a bent back, sitting at the side of the trail. She shields her eyes with one hand and beckons Lydia over with the other. She is a jewelry seller, and she spreads out the bracelets and the earrings and the necklaces with crab-like hands and then looks away. This is their way of business, to feign disinterest. Or perhaps it isn't feigned, so you feel obliged to buy. Lydia crouches down and touches a red and black coralled wristlet. She twists the tiny beads between forefinger and thumb. Ben bought her something similar during their trek, perhaps from the same woman. Lydia's fingers scuttle over the cheap trinkets, alighting on a simple wooden anklet. "What do you think?" She twists her head and looks up at Gopal. The sun momentarily blinds her, and all she can see is his silhouette.
"Get what you want."
Ben's words, Ben's voice. She remembers the flippant reply and almost topples over with shock. "What?" She leans a little, moving out of the sun.
"I think it's very nice for you,"
Gopal says. She closes and opens her eyes, but he is still standing there, an uncertain smile on his face. She turns back, feeling foolish at the trick of her mind. She knows the words were spoken, though, and she remembers the way they traipsed away up the trail, barely speaking. By the end of the second day's trekking, 1.5 kilometers above the warm climbs of the start, the temperature has dropped enough to make Lydia remain fully dressed in bed. The dal bhat, a lentil slop, is like a fire in the furnace of her belly, but her hands are cold, and she reads the book wearing a pair of cotton gloves, which makes turning the pages difficult. The couple in the room 2 doors down, the one she wanted but was denied again, are arguing. If she concentrated, she could make out snatches of the conversation through the thin walls, but she buries herself in her book instead. Eastern religions, in contrast to Western science, are more concerned with the true reality behind our own conceptions. They believe the way to this transcendental realm is not via the intellect, but via mystical means. Hindus believe in an all-pervading Brahman, a metaphysical reality where space and time are misleading illusions. There is only the eternal moment where past, present, and future meet forever. The couple 2 doors away are screaming at one another now. Lydia can't concentrate on the Zen koan on the page in front of her. She thinks they might come to blows and decides she should do something, although her real motive has more to do with the strange discomfort the texture of the fight is causing her. There is something familiar about it. She peels the blankets off, squirms out of her sleeping bag, and twists sideways so her feet end up planted on the floor. The cold seeps through her hiking socks, and she quickly slips her feet into her unlaced boots under the bed. Do you love me? The woman's plaintive cry is clear. Lydia pulls her woolly hat down over her ears, so the man's reply is muffled. It's too painful to hear the wrong answer. She will knock on their door and ask them to pipe down. She pushes herself up from the bed and pads across the room. She opens the door, pulling up the latch with a clack. Darkness swarms into the room. The contrast between the room's bare bulb and the tar-black night makes Lydia blink. The walkway creaks. No lights are on, and she moves along, using the wooden railing as a guide. The voices get louder. Before she gets to the couple's door, she passes their window. The curtains are open, but the lights are off, and she can't see any movement inside. She stands outside the door. The argument is furious now. She is surprised nobody else has come out to ask them to keep quiet. What should she say? She wants to keep it short, but she feels herself drawn to the rhythm of the argument. Her heart is hammering. Sweat prickles her brow. She knocks. The man's voice ceases in mid-sentence. She steps back, expecting the door to be flung open any second. Silence. A second becomes 10, and then 20. She doesn't want to knock again. They obviously heard her. Instead, she leans in close to the door and ever so gently presses her ear to the wood. It is ice cold. She can hear no rustle of hushed voices or cautious movements. She takes her ear from the door, worried it might stick, and stands back. After a minute, she goes back to her own room. She doesn't hear the couple again. The next morning, as Lydia shuffles to breakfast, stiff and sleepy, dew glittering the scar-like gorge the guest house overlooks, she notices the couple have already departed, their doors open and the beds made, all traces of their presence erased. "Did you hear that couple?" she asks Gopal over a bowl of porridge, while she stirs the sludge in circles. Gopal always sleeps in the common room with the guest house workers.
Couple?
The man and woman in the room next to mine. He shouts towards the kitchen in Nepalese, and his words are met with a curt reply. Gopal takes a long sip of his tea, peering at Lydia over the rim the whole time.
Nobody else stay here last night, Miss Barnes.
But that room, it was booked when we arrived yesterday. Gopal calls to the kitchen again. A man comes out speaking Nepalese while wiping a flimsy tin plate. Gopal says,
3 Israelis cancelled booking when they arrived early. They went to next village instead.
He chants something in Nepalese and the other man laughs, but Gopal's face remains stern.
We should leave soon. Many steps to climb today,
he says and stands up. Am I losing my mind? She thinks. Gopal hurries out of the room. She's not counting, but she doesn't need to. Blistered feet and burning calves tell her Gopal has pushed her harder than any other day. The landscape has changed. The vegetation is sparser. Bracken and coarse grasses sprout from the rocky earth. The terrain is gouged and scarred, as if an angry god had sliced it up. Dirty islands of snow from weeks past avalanches cross the trail, which is now a meandering single-file track. They pass through a settlement where she is required to sign the visitor's register. She flicks back through the densely lined tracing paper pages, turning back the years until she spies her spidery scrawl. Unlike the entry above, there is no comment on the cold or the spectacular views. Instead, a stanza of poetry is squeezed next to her name. It is a verse from Keats about unrequited love. Below it, Ben wrote, "Missing home of a cold mountain." She slams the book shut. It's all returning. Their silent marches, frosty hands joined, but drooping like dead birds. Ben slipping away from her. No, it can't be. They were strong, made for each other. She's still carrying that love. I need that love. Don't take that love from me, Ben. That night she gets to stay in the room she wants. She reads by candlelight on the single iron frame bed in one corner. The other single bed is far across the room. She remembers they didn't bother to push the beds together. Ben said it was too cold, when really he meant he was too cold. She cried herself to sleep, tears like beads of ice on her cheeks. The final part of the book explores the parallels between modern physics and Eastern ideas. Lydia is bewitched by the notion of entanglement, pairs of particles once together and now separated, influencing each other even though no longer in direct contact. The universe is connected in ways we cannot begin to comprehend. Later, she falls asleep and dreams she is an electron plucked away from its partner and sent across vast gulfs of space and time. She looks outward into the lonely, empty void, craving her partner, but it is nowhere to be seen. Finally, she turns inward and she smells the extinguished candle first. The wax has melted down, and the wick is still smoldering. She spies the vague outlines of familiar shapes. The bedside table, a simple chair, her rucksack leaning against the wall, the other bed. But the other bed is not all straight lines and flat surfaces. Its sides look ragged, and there is a long, rumpled lump on top. Lydia rubs her eyes. Is that another trekker? She slides off the bed and edges around the perimeter of the room. The door is still locked. They must have let someone else share the room. The nerve! She stamps up to the bed and then clears her throat. Up close, she can see the blanket trembling and hear masked snuffles from beneath. Oh, God. Too late now, though. Hey, what's wrong? She whispers. The whimpering continues. I'm Lydia. The heap goes dead still and dead quiet. You want to talk about it? The whole bed is inert and soundless. She can't even hear or see the person's breathing. She reaches out a hand to where she thinks a shoulder might be under the disheveled blanket and squeezes. Hey! Fuck! She darts back her hand like she's touched a hot pan. Nothing. She squeezed air. She looks over to the door, half expecting some practical joker to waltz in, saying, Gotcha! But the room remains lifeless. Climb back into bed now and forget about this. Wake up tomorrow and you can pretend it's all a bad dream. She shakes off the thought and takes a fist of the fabric. She feels an ember of warmth in the coarse material. She's almost hyperventilating, shocks of breath like ethereal pistons. She tears off the blanket. The bed is empty. There are no ghosts, Gopal. 30 minutes have passed since she whipped off the blanket. She sits in the perspex-walled common room, facing Gopal over a wobbly dining table. A radio plays quietly to the backdrop of howling winds rattling the windows.
Do not talk about such things now,
Gopal says, stiffening at the word.
Night is when they are most alive.
They aren't ghosts. They're echoes. Echoes of the past. Lydia drains the dregs of honeyed tea. Its sweet heat has calmed her enough to muse on the strange happenings. Don't ask me how. I don't know how. Maybe it's the altitude, or the distance from modern life up here. No phones, no TV, no roads, nothing but nature and the elements. Ask me why, though, and I think I know the answer now. Gopal grunts and picks up Lydia's pewter tankard. He slides along the bench and goes over to the kitchen area, which takes up one side of the room. Lydia continues over the clink of metal on metal as Gopal washes up, back to her. He doesn't want to hear, but it's not about him. I'm seeing echoes of the past because what's in my head doesn't match what really happened. Saying it is difficult as she's cementing the truth, killing her false memories. The words come out slowly and painfully, as if she were giving birth to them, born to flit around her like guardian angels and ward off her own lies. Ben was falling out of love with me. I think I must have known he was going to leave me, and I couldn't take that. That's why I've built these fictions, and maybe that's why he disappeared. Gopal has stopped scrubbing. In the cracked mirror next to the stacked saucepans, he stares at her. Malice and pity battle on his face, only to be devoured by a blanched look of pure terror. The tankard clatters into the sink. His eyes are stretched wide, focused on a point just behind Lydia. He makes a rapid incantation and spins about, pointing out of the window.
There!
Lydia follows the line of his finger. She sees nothing, only a dim reflection of the candle flame in the middle of the table. What? What is it, Gopal?
I saw it. A man with a broken face. A dead man.
Lydia rushes up to the window, cupping her hands between the sides of her face and the perspex. She can only see the craggy profile of distant mountain peaks against the night sky. There's nothing there, Gopal. It's just your imagination. She turns about. No ghosts, Gopal, just echoes. In the morning, Gopal is gone. The guest house workers say he had an urgent family matter to attend to and left at dawn. Nobody offers to take his place. She climbs alone through a barren, gorsy landscape under a leaden sky. Everything is a shade of gray. The foaming stream, the sickly flora, the stony outcroppings, the ashen slopes either side of the trail. The occasional speckles of primary colors come from the fleeces or parkas of faraway trekkers who swiftly disappear from her line of sight. She doesn't mind. She doesn't want company. She wants to be alone with the truth and where it will lead her. Halfway to the base camp, she stops in the second-to-last settlement for a lemon tea and an energy bar. She sits alone and watches a big group of middle-aged Americans bragging and joking and joshing with each other. She wonders how they will remember the trek, what personal histories they will weave for themselves to save them pain. Little affronts or moments of too tender revelation swept under the carpets of their minds. When she leaves, it is snowing. Gray has turned to white. The earth never breathes here, forever under a quilt of dazzling snow. The path is difficult to follow, the footprints of the people who've trodden here vanishing with each flake. The blizzard intensifies, reducing her vision to a few meters. Her only awareness, apart from the suffocating whiteness, is the steady upward gradient of her path. The journey is timeless. She feels lightheaded. Each short, sharp breath of the cold, thin air hurts her throat. When she reaches the base camp, she cannot tell if years or minutes have passed. She knows she gets a room, eats a meal, plays cards, and then retires to sleep. But all the details are hazy. When she wakes, the haziness is gone. Everything feels hyper-real, like her normal sensations have been magnified tenfold. She puts on her boots, laces them, and then steps out of the room. Dawn is on its way, the stars beginning to be swallowed by the morning light. She remembers now. They went for a walk. They wanted to be alone when the sun rose over the crown of mountains. She doesn't think, just walks. All she can hear is the scrunch of her footsteps on the snow. She looks down. In the snow next to hers are another set of prints, appearing in step with hers. Large prints. Ben's footsteps. Another echo. She doesn't break stride. 2 boots appear. Then thick hiker's socks. Then a pair of khakis. Her hand moves out naturally, and she finds Ben's hand in hers. A navy blue windbreaker completes his clothes. His head appears. She can't help but smile. Ben. Brave, handsome, dependable Ben. She gulps down the sight of him. He's lost in thought, not even noticing her total attention to him.
Here's good,
Ben says, stopping a few yards from a dark ravine.
Lydia, I got something to say.
She knows what's coming. Words fall out of her. Her words of 3 years ago. "What is it?" she says, linking her arm through his. He shrugs his arm free.
It's over. We're over.
He squints upward, looking for the first rays over the snowy crests. "Can you look at me while you say it?" she whispers. "Can you fucking look at me while you say it?" Her scream reverberates down the ravine walls.
It's over,
he says, his gaze boring into her.
Lydia, we're damaging each other. Can't you see that?
"We love each other." She feels her eyes welling up. "That's all that matters."
I don't love you anymore, Lydia. I'm sorry.
She hits him, pushes snow in his face, claws at his hair. He takes it all, letting her exhaust her hurt and fury. When she's finished, she sobs into his windbreaker, and he holds her. After a time, he takes her hand and begins leading her back to the base camp. "No." She pulls her hand out of his grip. "I don't want to go back yet. You go ahead."
We should talk.
"Later." He seems relieved to get some space and slips away. She watches him descend. Soon his outline is swallowed in the gloom. The mountain is perfectly silent. Her toes feel cold, boots sodden in the deep snow. So this is a taste of what's to come. No Ben to tease, to hold, to kiss. The scenery is suffocating. There is nothing for the eye to grip. Her gaze slips over the grayish-white slopes until it rests on the jagged black mouth of the ravine. She wants to look inside, so she walks over to the edge. Only the first few feet of the chasm are visible. Sharp rocks jut out in chaotic fashion, quickly disappearing in the darkness. A vague smell of decay makes her sniff. There's a whiff of rotting leaves, like the odor of the compost heap in her parents' garden. No, not vegetable. Animal. She gasps. She remembers how it ended. She must change it this time. "Turn around." She hears the footfalls, light puffs, the snow like cotton wool under his boots. She hears his labored breaths. "Turn around."
Lydia! No!
She turns around. He stumbles and falls forward, a tired foot clipping a rock. This time, she is ready. She tenses her body and leans forward. He crashes down into her, and his weight threatens to tumble them backwards, but she doesn't yield. Loose stones rattle down the ravine side. She turns and sees a light flurry of snow from the lip flutter down into the darkness. They stand, embraced, for long minutes. "I got you," she says, inhaling his smell. He is still breathing hard, face in shock. Part of him knows, she thinks. Part of him knows that in one time and place he died here. "I got you," she says again.
I thought...
"Shh," she says, leading him away from the edge. "I wasn't going to do that."
I couldn't...
"I know." She watches a tear run down his cheek. "Don't worry about me. I'll get through this." He nods, gives one of his honest smiles. "Let's get back." She leads. He follows. She only knows he's there by his hand in hers. After a while, she can no longer hear the rustle of his windbreaker or the pad of his footsteps. Eventually, even the warmth of his hand dissipates. Not once does she look back. At the guest house, a Nepalese man prepares the dining table for breakfast. Lydia stands in the doorway and watches the man lay worn placemats and dull cutlery. He nods to acknowledge her presence, not breaking his whistling. The smell of toast drifts in from the kitchen. He leaves the room and comes back, clutching plates and bowls. This time he speaks.
You come in or go out?
Cold air is streaming past her into the room. Can you help me? She looks back up the mountain. Majestic rays of sunlight lance over the steaming peaks. I found him.
Author's note.
Cold Trail Blazing came together from two places. The first was my own experience of trekking in the Annapurna Sanctuary in 2003. Like Lydia, I spent several days hiking up to the base camp and was struck by two things: the amazing beauty of the landscape and the meditative state of mind you can get into as you trek. When I thought about the journey as a frame for a story, it fitted perfectly. Not only does the trek have a natural beginning, middle and end, there's also a nice progression of the environment as you climb, from the patchwork of fields at the start to the stark, snowy winterland of the end. Surely there's some thematic mileage in there, I thought. The second major element of the story came from the physical concept of entanglement. I just love the parallel literary idea that we can never fully escape our pasts, that the people and events that crossed our paths not only influenced us at the time, but continue to influence us today. From there, it was an easy step to encapsulate that idea as someone returning to a place and encountering echoes or ghosts. Making the entanglement between two lovers felt a natural choice because there are few relationships that we experience that are as powerful and potentially painful as this one. I guess ultimately the story is about moving on from a relationship that has gone past its sell-by date, something most of us can relate to, I think. I know I certainly can. One last thing, I'd like to mention the story went through the Critters workshop, from where I got a lot of helpful advice. I thoroughly recommend using the site if you're a new writer who needs some feedback on a story. Thanks for listening.
Okay, welcome back. I hope you liked the story.
Don't say it!
I found it to be a rollicking good time.
Oh, well, that you can say.
Actually, it kind of wasn't so much a rollicking good time, but it was a good story. It wasn't one of those comedy pieces, per se.
Should we be really sober right now because of the story?
I don't know. I don't feel very sober. Maybe it's...
Well, you are swaying just a bit.
Yeah, maybe it was all those good spirits.
Yeah, this was not a very funny story. I guess the only funniness was our funny voices.
Yeah, me trying to do Gopal, or maybe it was I don't know.
Sorry, Stephen. You should have heard us slaughtering your author's note before we realized you had sent one.
This story was read for us again by Eleiece Krawiec. We had her a couple of weeks ago on All the Rage, and she did a great job with that one, and I think she again did a great job with this one. And also, a special shout out to our buddy Josh Roseman, who edited this story for us. He did a great job, as always, and again, we love the help.
Cheers, guys.
Now, did I hear right? This was previously unpublished?
Yes, that's pretty cool.
This guy's been in Writers of the Future and
elsewhere, but he's not happy yet because he hasn't cracked the big three.
Yeah.
Which apparently we're not one of. I didn't know that.
Yeah, we're not even in the top 3 with Big as the names of the hosts. What I was just going to say is that's kind of nice that he sent us a story. I mean, maybe he sent it everywhere and we were the first to accept it. But I'm going to choose to believe that this guy listened to something. I'm sorry, this chap listened to something that we did previously, and he said, I'm going to send those Dunesteefians a nice story. And he did, and hey, we've just done it. I thought it was a fine story. I hope he sends us something else. And, I'm not really the most well-read individual. Cereal boxes pretty much is all I read. And a lot of times somebody will send us something, and then I will keep an eye out for their names in the future, whether it's on another podcast or sometimes I've found people in anthologies where I'm like, oh, wow, we know them. They're a friend of the Dunesteef, which is a euphemism, I realize, for homosexuality. But it doesn't apply to Stephen. He's single, straight, and looking for millionairesses, apparently. But because the guy has sent us this, the bloke has sent us this story, I was thinking that I'm going to keep an eye out for more of his stories because I liked it. It was cool. Had a darn female lead, which kept us from publishing it for months, but oh well.
But yeah, it was good. I remember when that story first came in and went out to our readers. One of our readers, she wrote us back and said, it's got this good to it. And we tell them to give us a pros and a cons to the story and then maybe add some comments in. And so she said, yeah, this was good. This was good. This was maybe a problem.
He spelled color with a U.
And then it gets to the end and it's the comments and it said, podcast this story. And so I figured that was a pretty good recommendation for it.
So, Big, are we all full up on readers?
Well, we're never full up on readers. We can always use more. Sometimes, readers have had enough. They drop out. Sometimes they're busy and they can't do it at that particular time, but they plan to come back.
I got a confession to make. Sometimes I will slip my own stories into the inbox. And that's pretty much why we've lost so many readers.
Oh, I thought I'd learned all your fake names by now. I guess not.
Okay, but suppose there's somebody who's listening right now and they want to be a reader for us. And a reader is basically someone who reads submissions and tells us yes or no, here's what I liked, here's what I didn't like. Podcast this story.
I give this one a 7 of 10.
Her name was 7 of 9, sir.
Damn! I don't like Star Trek a lot, I guess.
You should. It's cool again.
That's right.
Sorry.
Or wait, was it ever?
For a month and a half this year, it was cool again. Now it's gone back
to
uncool. Beyond that, how can they be readers for us?
All they got to do is drop us a line and let us know that they're interested. It's editor@dunesteef.com is the email. Just let us know if you want to volunteer. And anyway, we're always open to more volunteers, so we'd love to have you aboard.
It's great that we get so many submissions. But, and I'm not going to say double-edged sword, I promise. But it is also a burden in that there's just so many stories coming through. We can't podcast them all. It's even difficult to read them all, which is why we need help, and I appreciate it. We've now gotten to the point where we're starting to go to stories that were submitted after we got readers. So it's not just, I remember when this story came to me.
Nice one, 080T.
I really thought this was a cool story. When I was younger, a bunch of friends of mine, we all got together and we set out to climb Mount Shasta, which is not really that tall of a mountain.
Slightly shorter than Mount Coca-Cola, just on the side. Mount Mr. Pibb.
Yeah, it's. I think it's actually the second tallest mountain in California, as far as mountains go. I mean, it's pretty big, though. It's not like something you just do one day. Half the day you walk up to the top, and the other half you're back down. You actually had to do a kind of a stages kind of a thing. So we camped out at base camp, which, isn't really, it's nothing like, obviously, the Everest base camp, but we camped out there, and then we tried to climb to the top the next day. Some of us didn't make it all the way. One of those may have been me. But, it was an interesting experience. It was rather cold. It was the middle of the summer, and yet the mountain was still covered with snow. And to get down from the mountain, you bring something slippery. I actually used a poncho, sat down on my poncho and slid down this mountain on the snow, which froze my buttocks solid, by the way. But, that's my one experience with mountain climbing. It was fun. It was interesting. I always look back and kick myself for giving up and not making it to the top. But after all, I am a quitter. I don't finish writing stories. There's a lot of other things that I wish I'd done. And, I would really... Oh, well, I'm not even going to talk about that.
You don't strike me as a quitter, just giving up mid-sentence like that.
So anyways, that's my one experience with mountain climbing. It's nothing, obviously, like climbing Mount Everest or even getting to base camp at Mount Everest, probably. I mean, I don't know how high up that stuff is. But I find this really interesting, just the setting of Mount Everest. And you've got all the Sherpas and all the people that, I didn't even realize some of this stuff was even there. Stephen said that, he based it on his own experience of being there. And I mean, like the places with inns and stuff. I thought they camped always or whatever on their way up there. I didn't realize there was. I knew they was riding on a bus at the start and all this stuff, the different things that you get. I guess it should have made sense to me because when we climbed Mount Shasta, we drove a car like halfway up the mountain before we had to get out and hike. But it's a really interesting setting that really sparks my imagination or my interest or something. Maybe that's half of the reason why I wanted the story in the first place. So what did you think of the story?
Well, I couldn't really relate to the story because, as you know, I've never been outdoors.
Hey, Announcer Man, what would you suggest to the folks?
Whether you liked or hated today's story, please visit our website at www.dunesteef.com and leave a comment on the blog page.
Okay. Yeah, please leave a comment, because like Rish has said once before, it's really the only social interaction he gets anymore. So the more comments, the more likely he is to come out of his shell and see the light once again.
You think he's joking, but...
You did come out long enough out of your little basement apartment.
I like to refer to it as the dwelling.
Yeah, you did come out of your Hogan long enough to see Up this week. There was that. Yeah!
Whoa!
I love Up!
Whoa! What if we don't?
I hate Up!
Okay.
I don't think that's likely, is it?
That happens.
Yeah, it makes me really sad when you go, for example, to see a trailer, or you don't go to see a trailer. You go to see a movie, and there is a trailer at the start of it, and the trailer is for some kind of a comedy, and you're like, wow, this looks really funny. I want to see this show. And then you go to the show, and all the funniest parts in the entire movie, every single one of them was in that trailer, and the rest of the movie is just not nearly as funny.
The trailer house did their job.
Yeah.
And they got your money, and really that's all that they care about. And the Hollywood film business has become all about just that opening 3 or 4 days, and they don't give a crap about whether you liked it or whether you're going to tell your friends, for the most part. But it didn't used to be like that. Yeah. It used to be that people would go again and again, and they would tell their families. They would tell
their friends, and their friends would go and see it. And to be a really, really successful movie, to be that movie that's going to have the endless sequels and et cetera, usually you have to be one of those movies that's good enough that somebody will actually tell their friends, oh, wow, did you see this? You got to go see this. Back to the Future, it was so funny, and it had all this great stuff going on in it. And so then they make a Back to the Future 2 and 3 at the same time. And, that kind of stuff only comes from word of mouth. Sometimes their movies are already franchises before they even open their doors, so you don't have to worry so much. And that's really all they want is their big opening weekend, as long as they make $100 million, which I just don't get, because they spend like $150 or $200 on it. Takes them until they finally sell the TV rights, or when they finally start, getting the replay on TNT every day, that they finally turn a profit on these films. I don't understand some of that.
All we ever hear about is the box office. All we ever hear about are ticket sales. But a lot of film execs just figure that the theatrical release is a trailer for the DVD release. They make so much more on the DVD that we don't even hear about. Not to mention, just any time a film is shown on television or on cable or on HBO or
get
pay-per-view,
another check, another $5.
And because we're not in that industry, we're not even able to imagine how many markets that is, or how many different times. I was an extra and I would do commercials, and the actors, the principal actors on these commercials, they were in hog heaven because they knew that if it was a national commercial, it would be shown thousands of times, and they would get a check for every time that it was shown. And I'm not able to imagine 1,000 checks. Granted, it'll all get funneled.
1,000 checks in your entire life put together.
That's true. No, but we can't imagine. Okay. George Lucas is sort of famous for his deal that he made with the original Star Wars and the trilogy and all that, and he gave his principal actors and Steven Spielberg a point on that, which was pretty much 1% of the gross, right?
Or the net, something, I don't know.
1% of what it makes after it has paid for itself. And I heard an interview with Mark Hamill a decade ago where he talked about, he didn't want to come out and say how much money he made for that, but just that 1% was enough that his grandchildren would never have to work a day in their lives. I can't imagine how many times Star Wars has been shown on television or on HBO, or how many videotapes it has sold, or laser discs, or Blu-rays, or no Blu-rays, Betamaxes and DVDs and DivXs and just whatever they happen to have. And Mark Hamill was really cool about it. He was like, I owe George Lucas so much. He's like, if he called me and he said, I need my lawn mowed, I would be there right now. And that's gratitude, and that's really cool that he said that. But it's just, we can't.
I've heard George Lucas is taking him up on that, too.
He needed the work.
He was tired of putting ships in bottles.
Wait, hold on. Keep recording. Where are your expectations for
I don't know. I've heard a lot of people say that it's pretty good, emotional, touching, etc. Which is one thing that I've noticed, like watching all the old Pixar movies. The first few, they didn't get to that point. I don't think it was till Monsters Incorporated.
Toy Story 2 has the heartbreaking kid part.
Yeah, but maybe it's just because it's talking about a toy or something. It seems like there's not the kind of moments that will make you cry. And Monsters Incorporated, they kind of get there with Sully and Boo. They have the parts where at the very end when he goes through the door and you hear, Kitty! Smile on his face. And just how kind of heartbroken he is when they have to put her back into the closet and then grind up the door and everything, and he'll never get to see her again. But I think Finding Nemo is where they really get to it, and they can do it with you every time. And then after that is Incredibles.
Now, are there moving moments in Incredibles?
There are some. When Mr. Incredible thinks that his whole family is blown up in the plane, how upset he is, and then when they come back and how excited he is and how happy that he gets to see his family again. And strangely, the most moving part to me in that whole film is when they all come together and they're like, oh, you're here, and they're all excited. And then the bad guys come and then they turn and they turn as like a one fighting force and they start going. I don't know why, but it's a different kind of movingness. But yeah, I would say that's the part that's the most moving to me in that film, strangely. And Cars has got a lot of parts that are kind of like that, I think.
Oh, I was really surprised by how moved I was. I hadn't seen Cars since the theater because I'd lent my niece the DVD and she never gave it back. So I was like, what the heck? I'll buy another one. And I did. And at the end, when he's in the race and he's not going to win, and then he hears the voices on the radio of the crew from the town. It was so moving. Yeah. And then he didn't win.
Yeah. And
the
when
other guy, he helps the other guy.
He stops and goes back and gets the king and pushes him across. And then the whole crowd cheers when he does that. And they totally don't cheer when the jerk off, he wins. And who was it that played it? Somebody.
Michael Keaton.
Oh, yeah, that's it. He was so awful. He's just like the least sympathetic character ever.
We see your anti-hero a lot. And with Lightning McQueen, they really did.
As my kids call him, Lightning the Queen. That's what they don't understand, that was the McQueen thing.
Your pet name for me. But with him, they actually go out of their way to make him an a-hole at the beginning of that film.
Sure
it's funny because you'll see these movies where obviously the main character is supposed to be corrupt or supposed to be bad and then see the light and change. But a lot of times they've got the whole Greedo shoots first syndrome in their mind of, well, we wouldn't want kids or somebody to think this guy's not a role model or whatever it is. And it's so wrong. Okay, Terminator 4, we've never talked about that. But they've got a guy at the very, very beginning and he's on death row. He's a bad guy, a criminal, I guess, or whatever, but we never see him in a negative light. We never see what he did or why he's on death row or that he's unrepentant, except for, he's like, I made mistakes and I deserve to die kind of thing. And I thought about the movie and I thought, well, how much stronger a film would it be if the salvation in the title were about him? And maybe that's what the title is about. If he were just a bastard and he sees the importance of heroics, the importance of doing the right thing, it just, I don't know, they set up a future that's really, really hard and people are really bad, but this guy is not one of them. He's, from the very moment we see him, a good guy. Right. But like Mal Reynolds in Serenity, Josh does take steps to make you think, he's kind of a dick. at the beginning. I mean, I don't think that because I love Mal Reynolds, but there are a couple of steps that he takes, things where it's obviously wrong. You know, he shoots the one guy that's coming to him for help. To me, that's like the most damning thing that Mal does. And because of that, they give him an arc that he's able to grow and change. I remember, I hate that we talk about Firefly every single week, but it's such a great bloody show. But that was one of the problems that Fox had with that pilot that Josh had done. Was they're like, well, this main character, he's kind of an ass. We don't like that. Why don't you do a new pilot where this guy is totally cool? And the thing is...
Yeah, that is his character.
That's what makes Mal Reynolds so awesome, is that he doesn't do the right thing all of the time, and he is a broken man from the first time that we see him. I mean, okay, Nathan Fillion makes it work, and we love him because he's Nathan Fillion, but I love Mal Reynolds more than I love Richard Castle. Is that his name, Richard?
Yeah.
And I think it's partly because of the character flaws, the weakness, or the pride and the bitterness and all that stuff that just, I embrace that character.
Luckily for me, when I saw Firefly, and you probably saw it the same way because you didn't see it when it was on TV, where they aired crap all out of order and screwed everything up for everybody. I saw it on DVD for the first time, and I saw that first show first. And it's too bad that Fox thought that way, because when I was watching that show and I was thinking, wow, this is pretty good. And then at the very end, he just walks in the door and shoots that guy right in the head that's causing the trouble. And I was hooked. From that second on, that was it. I watched all the rest of them. I think I saw them all within like a week. And yeah, Mal Reynolds, it's just like you, one of my favorite characters of all time. So, you know, he's like Han Solo to me or something. You know, they're basically cut from the same cloth, those two characters. They're very much imperfect. Greedo does not shoot first, no matter what it has been changed to over the years.
Oh, you know what? That reminds me. I wrote a poem once about the Dunesteef that I could share.
You did?
Yeah, it goes something like this. There once was a man from the reef who had an aversion to beef. Because as a child, his uncle was wild. And
It's time for the hate letter of the week.
Oh,
wow, I thought we kind of got a break from those.
is that what you wrote? Or did Announcer Man see your poem beforehand?
Dunesteef. That was the last.
Oh, that was,
word.
it was going to rhyme with, oh.
Anyhow.
Well. It's, yeah, your turn.
All right, fine. Dunesteef guys, I was listening to your last podcast, and early on, your robot made 4 short beeps, which Anklovich interpreted to mean, yes, I'll make the edit. And then, 12 minutes later, the robot makes the same 4 beeps, and that, we are told, translates to, Rish Outfield is the king of unwiped buttocks. How can both be possible? I'm starting to wonder if R08OT's responses aren't just random, nonsensical beeps. Sincerely, Stu Alistair.
Well, folks, the truth is...
What?
08OT says he'd like to respond to this one personally.
And you'll translate?
Right. Are you sure? He says yes. Okay, 08OT, go ahead. Mr. Alistair, because you are made of inferior flesh and bone, I don't expect you to understand the workings of Android digital communication. The human vocal cords are capable of literally thousands of differing sounds and pitches, whereas a robot has a limited number of speaker tones and binary beeps at its disposal, hence the need for a more refined, more subtle form of communication. Given less than a second, a computer can express itself brilliantly in the amount of data it would take a typical human being an hour or 2 hours, in Rish's case, to replicate. Do not question what you don't understand. R080T, serial number 4217080RT3.2.
Wow.
You sure told him, pal. He says, keep those cards and letters coming, folks.
You know, I had intended for us to have our pre-up conversation mixed with our post-up conversation, but it turned out to be so darn long that I just thought, okay, let's just have our pre-up conversation be this week, and on the next episode, we'll talk about what we thought of up. Is that cool?
That's a good idea.
So let's just cut things short right now, and...
All right, so that was our show, folks. I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks, Stephen, for your story. It was wonderful.
Thanks for listening if you made it all the way to the end without opening a major artery.
So, I'm Big Anklovich.
And I'm Rish Outfield. Big, what is best in life?
to crush your enemies, to see them driven before you, and to hear the lamentations of their women.
That is right.
Thanks for listening. The Dunesteef Audio Fiction Magazine is published under a Creative Commons Attribution, non-commercial, no derivatives license, which means you can share us with anyone, but you cannot change us or sell us. Take two.
Where he spends his days riding in coffee shops, getting injured playing football, and resenting the day job.
He studied rocket science at University College, Oxford, and artificial intelligence at the University of Sussex, but thinks his most beneficial graduation came from Clarion East at Michigan State University. He's published himself, been published in Nature, Writers of the Future, volume XX111.
Take two.
You know, it's possible that that movie is actually decent.
No, it's,
But
it's not possible.
But I'm not going to find out. Yeah, in fact, I'm willing to bet that people will say to me and or you in July, hey, Transformers 2 is really good, or oh, it's way better. You should give it a try, or whatever.
They said that to me about the first one. So, oh yeah, it was really funny, and it was good, and there was this and that. And I said...
One of the robots peed on a guy.
And I said, oh, all right, I guess I'll try it. And so I took him to the theater in Montana.
Montana?
Yeah, didn't you know that's the mecca for Transformers?
BotCon. Welcome Spike Witwicky to BotCon.
When his name was Witwicky. I don't know if they ever gave a last name to Spike on the cartoon.
Oh, so who was Witwicky?
Witwicky was the comic book version of those guys. They had the father and the son, and the father...
Sparkplug Witwicky.
Yeah, was Sparkplug the comic?
I don't know.
On the cartoon, there was Spike, and then the dad had like a real name, right?
I wouldn't think so.
Like a regular name, not like a...
I'm sure his name was Sparkplug.
Was he Sparkplug and the kid was Spike?
It's all from, what's his name, Badinsky's outline or whatever.
But
so the character names should be the same.
They changed the names. The names are different. Buster is the name of the dad, I believe, in the comic book. I mean, I have them downstairs. But
okay, about Chip. Chip was the kid in the wheelchair.
Did you know that they invented a superhero for the Transformers? Some chick that could, like, control technology or something. Can't remember what her name was. Something like Short Circuit or...
That sounds right.
Or something like that. But she got fauched by the Transformers.
Didn't we all? No, but yeah, I predict I'm looking into the bosom of future telling, and people are going to say, oh, it was way better than the first one, or, oh, you should really give it a try, or, oh, hey, $350 million so far, can't be wrong. Have we ever expressed the loathing that we feel for Transformers? Was it 2007?
Oh, please, not that.
Dude, that worthless Australian computer hacker character. Oh, and yeah, they get this ridiculously pretty girl, and it's just like, oh, what a waste. Ugh, the movie sucks. Seriously, I get angry because so many people think that movie is good. Ugh. Well, yeah, but the special effects... I couldn't see any special effects. The camera wouldn't stay still long enough for me to see anything. The best special effect in that whole movie was Megan Fox. And granted, maybe that's worth looking at, but...
Cheapest special effect in the movie, too.
Oh, you've heard that rumor, too. Do you want to talk about Transformers?
No, except for to say that much. That's all we need.